Welcome and congratulations for being in the class, getting through the first week here. And I would like to actually start off by asking everybody to take a turn. There's only a few of us here, which is actually, we have a nice number. That way we can all talk a little bit. But I just wanted to ask you how you're feeling about this first week and if you have any questions. So whoever would like to go first.
Just as far as getting a subject ready for the project, because I did read over it, is there like any suggestions that you may have as far as like what is a good subject or what it is that you're looking for as a subject?
I absolutely will, and I will answer that question in just a little bit because I'm going to go over the entire project.
Okay.
So I promise.
Yeah. I had the same question.
Okay, does anybody else have a different question? Did everything seem smooth in the first couple of days of class?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for the most part, it's just getting the reading from Amazon on time.
Right. I understand that. It should be in the bookstore as well. Did anyone get the book from the bookstore?
I did. I rented the book.
Okay, so they do have it. All right, fantastic. All right, so I will get started here then with our Project 1 roadmap. I do things where you're actually seeing what your project is going to be at the very beginning of the project. So even though you're going to be writing it at the end or towards the end of the unit, you get to see it up ahead so that when you are reading the material, it can help you begin to think about what you want to write about. So I've already had some students come up with some really good questions in their graphic organizers that actually could be topics for this particular project. But I want to read through it with you, and I want to tell you, you in no way need to have a topic thought about already at all. So I wouldn't even, in the next week, we're going to be going through the rest of the chapters of the book. Basically, the goal, hello, welcome. It's good to see you. Basically, the goal is to actually get you to read the material, begin to think about what ethics are, how to determine whether something is ethical or not, and get used to the framework so that when you do write the project, you can use the framework from the book to help you. Okay, so let's go through this. I'm going to move you guys over here for a minute here. The first thing that I just always like to remind students is that if something seems off or is going wonky on you, please feel free to email me, especially in these first couple of weeks of class. A lot of times, either maybe I've made a mistake and something's not there, or maybe you've just clicked into one wrong place and you can't get back to what you need to. I'm here for you to be able to help you navigate the class. So it's normal to kind of feel a little bit confused at the beginning, and I do my best to try and make that minimal. Okay, so for our particular unit, we are looking at ethical argument, and we're looking at an ethics framework. And you've all read or should have almost finished reading the first chapter, which were the first 2 assignments of the book. How did you guys feel about reading that first chapter? Did it feel heavy to you?
Not really.
Really, I think it was just on trying to get the history of ethics. I was a little bit confused with that first section.
Yeah, I mean, the Quizlet did help a little when it comes to understanding what they were talking about in dialogue.
Good. Yeah, well, the idea of the history is that what's interesting about his book is that he's challenging you.
Come here.
Hi, Jay. He's challenging you to.
You have your phone charger, right?
Everything that he is.
I'm gonna be calling you, okay? So answer my phone call.
All right. So he's trying to make sure that you.
Okay.
He's challenging you to not take everything he says at face value. That's the first thing. So he doesn't want you just to read his book and follow what it is he has to say. But the history of ethics is that up until about 100 years ago, most people had this vision of ethics as being right and wrong and being objective, whereas from the last 100 years or so, there has been this concept of relativist ethics, meaning that it depends on the situation and culture and that sort of thing. And what he's trying to get you to understand or to challenge your assumptions on is that if we look at an issue that goes beyond a cultural preference that has to deal with ethics, that there is a right and a wrong, and he's going to help you understand how to figure out what that looks like. So it's not like, you know, I prefer to chocolate chip cookies to oatmeal raisin cookies. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about life and death, ethical actions that people are making, okay? So that is what we're going to be looking at in terms of trying to understand his framework of determining what ethics are, how do we determine what is ethical or not, and how can we manage our own biases to be able to determine whether an action is ethical or not, okay? So he's not suggesting that every action in the world is either ethical, is ethical. So let's say we decide to all own dogs, okay? He's not suggesting that that would be an ethical issue, but what he is suggesting is that if, for example, how many dogs should we be allowed to own? What is our responsibility? One of my big things in walking my dog every day is, are we responsible for picking up our dog poop, right? If the dog poops on somebody else's lawn. What's the ethical behavior of that? What if nobody picked up their dog poop, right? What if we just allowed our dogs to poop anywhere, everywhere without any repercussions? Are there repercussions? That sort of thing. So the reality is that the police are not coming out and arresting people for not picking up their dog poop, okay? So there's not a law for every ethical action that happens, but there are ways to figure out whether is it ethical to leave your dog poop on somebody's lawn that's not your own, right? And he's suggesting that there's a way to figure that out. So our goal for the actual writing project is to learn how to determine if something is ethical or not. And you are going to use the information that you learn from the book to investigate an unethical law or occurrence. Meaning that you could look at something that's a law that's either stated or implied, like I would imply that, and there probably is a law about dog poop if we wanted to look it up, but I would imply, even if there wasn't a law, it would be an unspoken law about picking up your dog poop. And I might write a paper about that. Now, that's not a big, huge issue, so that's probably not something you're passionate about. Should I write a paper about picking up dog poop or not? But there probably are real issues all around you that are really important to you to be able to look at, whether it's an actual law or it's an unstated law, right? So, for example, when I talk to my 13-year-old about texting, her unstated rules for herself about texting are very different than mine. So if somebody texts me and I can respond right away, I tend to, okay? For her, it's this issue of, it's like this social cachet where if she responds too soon, in her head, she looks desperate. So she's not going to respond too soon to a text unless it's about something that has to do right now, or if it's a text from her parents, right? But that's an unspoken rule. That's not a law. So, but you could discuss those sorts of things. So again, going back to the actual issue here for the project is to learn about how to determine if something is ethical. And we're getting there. So you're reading these 4 chapters. The first chapter was broken down into 2, and then you're going to read the last 3 chapters. You're going to be able to determine whether something is ethical. You're going to use this information to investigate an unethical law or occurrence. So something may have happened and you determine whether it's ethical or not. And so the key question, okay, the key text is obviously ethical argument. The key question or questions that are at the center of our writing project is, what is an unethical law, stated or implied, or occurrence that needs to be changed or responded to? And so you're going to choose one. You're going to argue why it's unethical in a multi-paragraph essay using ideas within ethical argument in your paper. The length, and you do need to include the procedure of verification and fallacy. So if you have chosen an unethical occurrence or law, you need to figure out, okay, somebody might look at it and say this, but this is really a fallacy, and here's why, okay? So it's 1,500 words. You are going to use outside sources. You do need to find something from the library. If it's something really current, it will probably be something from the internet too, with information about the law or occurrence. You're going to include a visual. And I include here, this is the prompt and parameters. We have a problem, we have an audience, we have a purpose, and then we have our process. So far, we have done Thursday's work, and Friday's work is due by tonight, okay? And for this first week, I gave everybody a 24-hour leeway if they needed it, okay? And then we have the work that we're doing Tuesday, Wednesday, and by the time we get to Friday, you'll have a draft. And then what's going to end up happening is by the following Wednesday on 6/12, you'll turn in a final draft. Okay, so in terms of topics, that's going to be up to you, but I'm always happy to be able to give you some opinions about what I feel about your topic, or let's say you have 2 and you want to ask about them, I'm happy to give you background. I want to take one moment to go back to the problem, the audience, and the purpose, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, okay? So the problem is, any society is rife with ethical issues that should be different. Choose one that you think is a problem. It should be something you care about. So again, if you don't care about it, don't write about it, because you're not going to care about it as you're writing. And I promise you, there's not a single person who doesn't have something that upsets them about an ethical issue. There's always ethical issues to be worked on. So you're going to look up the information to investigate on your particular topic, and your job is to convince the audience that there's an unethical issue, and you are going to anticipate counter arguments and use fallacies, where applicable, okay? Your audience is to convince the person, group, or institution who has the power to make changes. So I am not your audience member, okay? I do have certain parameters that you need to write in the third person, and you have to follow MLA format, But I'm not the audience. The audience is to convince either a person, group, or institution who has the power to make the changes that this particular law or occurrence is unethical. And it could be a single person, or it could be our society or community, or it could be a particular, like, let's say somebody wanted to write about police brutality. It would maybe be the institution of the police, right? So there's different groups that you could potentially write to, okay? And the purpose of this, why this is an important assignment, is that all through our lives we have decisions to make. Some are based on preference and desire, okay, such as I want to live here, I want to do this particular job, you know, that kind of thing, while others are more serious and they may involve others. And so these latter types of decisions are ethical in nature, and it's our responsibility as members of the community to take these decisions seriously and maturely so that we can avoid infringing on the rights of others and potentially hurt them. And this is really important. This is really, you know, when we're living in a community, this goes way beyond English. This, you know, hits into sociology and anthropology and those types of things, and civics, that the way we live and the choices we make are important, and they help determine how we may behave and change the society that we live in, okay? So at this point in time, I'm opening it up and wanting to ask you if you have any questions about the project itself. Does anyone have any ideas about what they might want to write on at this point? And it's okay if you say no.
I kind of mentioned in the flip grip, I'm thinking about doing or talking about the Alabama abortion law.
Yes, I think that's great. I think you absolutely, that's, you know, what's interesting is that I never would have anticipated a few years ago that this would ever be an issue to talk about again. And so I'm always surprised that things come up, but this is why this book and why these issues are so important. So yes, that would be a great topic to write on, and timely. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
I also have a question. Like, I mean, I also want to like write about the abortion. Like, is it okay if anyone else is writing it?
Okay, can you get closer to your microphone? I heard a little bit of what you said, but I didn't hear the end of what you said.
I mean, I was wondering, like, because I know there's going to be a lot of people who would want to write about the abortion. Like, is it okay that there's more than one paper about it?
Yes, it is. But the thing about what's interesting too about talking about this whole abortion issue is that in the past, you know, number of years, I've actually said no more abortion papers. I've read enough about them over my teaching career. But I am okay that you write about the abortion issue as long as it's something that deals with something in our current time. So it needs to connect to something that's current, as opposed to rehashing older issues, if that makes sense. I mean, you can set the stage with the history of the movement, but really make it current.
Okay.
Anybody else? You're all good. Now, did anyone have any issues with the reading at all? Nobody had any questions about any parts of the reading? You liked the Quizlet? Found that so you looked a little bit ahead here. I have the setting the stage. When you were reading,
When I was reading the Rick and Nina, I was kind of like, Nina makes a good point, but then I was like, the Rick makes a good point too. So then it kind of made me feel good that my first option was Nina, because I know at the end it turns out that Nina was the right one.
Well, you know, I always tell students, to me, the Rick and Nina, I know it's written in a little bit of a cheesy way, but I really feel like he did a good job overall because it illustrates how we all feel, right? It illustrates this idea that we want to agree to disagree, right? Have you ever, you're in a relationship with somebody and you love them, maybe it's a significant other or it's a parent or a child, and they have a different opinion than you, right? And so I agree to disagree, right? But when you are making choices to behave in a particular way, right? It goes deeper. The stakes are higher than just agreeing to disagree about something. So if you're going to behave in a particular way, you need to think about how that behavior affects others, right? And I think that that's why this book is so important. And I think that he does a good job in writing Rick, because I think we all come from this position of being raised to try and be respectful to other people's beliefs. But this goes beyond beliefs, right? So it's not about religious beliefs. It's not about faith-based beliefs. It's not about preferential beliefs. It's not about cultural beliefs. It's about behaving in a way that is equitable to others. And sometimes our culture says, dictates that we should behave in a way that is not ethical. And sometimes it's just preferential based. And so the rest of the book is really going to help us to be able to kind of tease out or peel back the layers and see whether something is a preference or whether something is an ethical choice. And so, I think that the conversation, while slightly cheesy, is actually a really good one. So I'm glad you appreciated that. And there's going to be more, Rick and Nina.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I also want to mention that that's what helped me understand more about the book, the analog between Rick and Nina.
Yes.
I even thought it was sometimes it was funny also. But I was able to understand more about chapter 1 because I read it a couple times because I started reading it before and I didn't know that the analog, we would have to read it too. I mentioned it and I read it and I was like, okay, now I understand better.
Right. And I think he does this on purpose. And I also want to tell you that when you're to me, like I said, the book itself, when I read and reread the book, I only read a few pages at a time. But I also, whenever I am looking at a chapter, I will go through the chapter and look at the subheadings, and I go and look at the conclusion in order to help myself know where I'm heading so that I could understand it better. And I think that the questions that I'm asking you, I think, help guide you to understand the book better. And I also think that there's going to be a little check yourself quiz that's going to help you understand it better. And I just want everybody to feel comfortable with not understanding everything perfectly the first time or even the second time that you read it, that this book is something that really takes several readings. But what I don't recommend is I don't recommend going, okay, I have 20 pages to read and I have 45 minutes or 40 minutes and then I got to get this assignment done, so I'm just going to force myself to sit here and read it, because that's not going to work so well, because you want to really be able to understand it and have time to annotate it. Mm-hmm. I also want to say that the rectangles that are in the book, if you ever see a rectangle, I would put a little flag in there and I would annotate that and have that as part of your notes, because those are extremely helpful, the little rectangles in the reading. And I don't know if I can find one really quickly here, but I'm going to try to look. But yes, I think the Rick and Nina is a good way of helping you understand the context of the academic speak here. All right, so we're at and while I'm looking, anyone is welcome to say something or add something. This right here, this relativism versus and subjectivism,
They're
and
really
then
great
getting the
examples.
cultural relativism.
Help me understand too.
Say that again.
Those are great examples. That's what actually helped me understand each category a little bit better between the
Yes.
different.
Yeah, me too. And once you physically have your book, I know there's some people that don't physically have it, it'll be even easier. I don't know why that's doing that little thing at the bottom, but let's see. Oh, right here. This is super important. See, we get to the rectangle and the procedure of verification. So whether something is ethical, we can verify them or falsify them ourselves at another time. Someone else, regardless of that person's cultural bias, can do that as well. I would put a little caveat next to number 2, meaning that it's somebody else who's trying to look at something ethically, not somebody who's trying to look at it with a personal preference. And then the claims can, and I think number 3 goes with number 2, that the claims can withstand rational criticism. So these 3 things are really important. And I guess that, when we're talking about the whole abortion debate, that the fact, the Roe versus Wade in 1974, and then we're now looking at this 45 years later, but that, it was a different time then. And so I'm going to read this paragraph out loud because I think this is important. These 3 steps involve the gradual elimination of subjective. Subjective means emotional. The subjective and cultural are like preferential elements. And the identification of those elements in our judgments that are objective, cross-cultural, and impersonal. And it doesn't mean that this is how you are in life, that you're always going to be objective, cross-cultural, and personal. No one's suggesting that. We all have our emotions, we all have our based and steeped in our culture, and we all are personal. But it's about deciding whether something is ethical or not. I really want to hit that nail hard with the hammer, that it's not about how we live all the time, it's about how we make those difficult ethical decisions, okay? And Kurtler asserts that the method is not perfect, but it can be quite successful. It involves proposal and disposal, criticism and defense, modification and adaptation, and above all else, it requires an open mind and intellectual honesty, which means it requires us to challenge our own assumptions and get uncomfortable. Because there's certain things that if it were up to me and I were the ruler of the world, I would make certain decisions that may not be ethical based on my own preferences, right? But that's not how the world works. And so when I'm trying to make decisions, like as a teacher, I've spent a lot of time coming up with how to behave ethically within the classroom that goes beyond what the college is telling me to do. There's a college handbook of expectations and rules of conduct, but even beyond that, there's still wiggle room for me to make choices. And I'm still trying to make sure that I'm making ethical choices which may go against my personal preference, if that makes sense. So I think that this rectangle along with, this little paragraph is a good challenge to keep in mind so that we can really try to determine whether something is ethical or not. And if we're ever in a position to make ethical decisions, and we are, all of us are, they may be smaller ethical decisions, but we are, that we actually do them with an open mind and intellectual honesty and be open to challenge our own personal biases. All right. It is the hour mark already. I just looked up and I just noticed. Does anyone have any other questions, and it could be about the unit itself or just about the class?
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being part of this. And like I said, every single one of these meetings are different. So the next one will have different content and, different numbers of people here and that sort of thing. And so I invite you to keep coming back. And thank you so much. I will end the meeting then.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.